Chapter 11. Pill Cultivation Workshop Outlet. Not too far ahead of him, Meng Hao saw someone screaming for help. Before the person could get off of the plateau, the huge man's flying sword hit him, piercing his neck. He fell twitching to the ground in a shower of blood, rattled out a last breath, then died. The huge man grabbed his victim's bag of holding, then turned and headed back into the public zone. Meng Hao watched the grisly scene unfold, then further observed what was happening on the plateau. The sounds of slaughter drifted along with the wind, which carried the scent of blood and gore into Meng Hao's nostrils. You can get rich overnight in this place, but it's also extremely dangerous. For cultivation, for spirit stones, people put their lives on the line. It's not really worth it. Meng Hao frowned. He was almost at the peak of the third level of qi condensation, but what was happening up there was just too chaotic. It would be too easy to be injured, and if he were robbed, it would have a long-lasting effect. Meng Hao thought about the lack of spirit stones in his bag. If he depended on receiving spirit stones distributed by the sect, who knew how many years he would have to wait? Muttering to himself, he looked up at the cultivators on the plateau. They fought fiercely, each and every one having suffered injuries. Suddenly, Meng Hao had a flash of inspiration, an idea. His idea grew more and more clear, and his eyes began to shine. He turned and hurried off, not to the Immortal's cave in the southern mountain, but rather down to the outer sect. He skirted the main square and eventually arrived at a building. The building appeared to be ancient and was surrounded by the fragrant aroma of medicine. Inscribed above the doorway were characters which read, Pill Cultivation Workshop. It wasn't his first time coming here. Actually, in his first month after being promoted to the outer sect, he had come here once to check out the various medicinal pills which were for sale. That was when he had learned about the fasting pills you could buy which would prevent hunger for several days. The only currency used here was spirit stones and spirit condensation pills. Unfortunately, the exchange rate was very unfair. For example, one spirit condensation pill could be traded for 10 fasting pills. Because of this, few people came here, and it tended to be cold and deserted. When he arrived, Meng Hao didn't hesitate. It wasn't large inside, and sitting cross-legged right in the middle of the room was a sickly-looking middle-aged man. Surrounding him on the interlocking wooden shelves were an assortment of gourd bottles, inscribed upon which were the names of various medicines. There were blood coagulation pills, which could treat external injuries, skeletal relaxation pills to relieve fatigue, spirit refreshment pills to temporarily increase energy, and of course fasting pills and appetite control pills. There were even marrow growth pills which could treat broken and crushed bones. There were many types of medicines, but all of them were considerably costly. For most, the cost of 3 to 10 pills was one spirit condensation pill. To most disciples of the inner sect, a spirit condensation pill was worth fighting over, so few were willing to come here and trade them away. Meng Hao strolled around the pill cultivation workshop, muttering to himself, his eyes glittering. Then he pulled out 5 spirit condensation pills and exchanged them for a handful of different types of medicines. It seemed the sickly man didn't see customers like Meng Hao very often. He brightened up immediately, handing over the bottle gourds of medicine. Placing all the bottle's gourds into his bag of holding, Meng Hao left, carefully taking a circuitous route through the mountainous forest back to the Immortal's cave. By the time he arrived, night had fallen. He sat down cross-legged, looking at the 4 bottle gourds. The sages said, if you do not expend, you will not profit. I've paid a lot this time, and I'm going to get a lot in return. Quietly comforting himself in this way, he stood and left the cave, returning shortly with a long tree branch about the thickness of his arm, along with a large pile of leaves. He pulled a green robe out from Zhao Wugeng's bag of holding and tore the seams apart, then laid it out in front of him. It seemed the right size, so he pulled another robe out, tore the seams, and placed it with the first. He looked down, contented. Next, he crushed up the leaves to produce a thick sap. Then, he dipped his fingers into the makeshift ink and wrote several large characters onto the cloth in sweeping calligraphy. He looked at it, feeling quite satisfied, then closed his eyes and began doing breathing exercises. The night passed, and early the next morning he picked up the tree branch and left the cave hurriedly. It didn't take long to reach the plateau, and despite the early hour, there were already a few disciples there locked in battle. The fierceness of the fighting was readily apparent. Ignoring the other cultivators, Meng Hao passed the large stone tablets and walked onto the plateau. His eyes scanned the surroundings, until falling to rest on a boulder which stuck up out of the ground along the border. He walked over and sat down cross-legged on the boulder, looking every bit the peaceful and harmless scholar. Occasionally, some of the others would look at him darkly, whereupon he would reveal some of his cultivation level. Frightened, they left him alone. He decided to wait until more people arrived. Time passed, and gradually more and more fellow disciples arrived in the public zone. Soon, there were about 20 people. Some of them looked at the kind, scholarly Meng Hao and started to walk toward him. All he had to do was reveal a bit of his cultivation level, and they would retreat in shock. After a while, he figured there were enough people. He slapped his bag of holding, retrieving the cloth strip. He attached it to the tree branch, which he then stabbed into the clay soil next to the boulder. The mountain breeze lifted the cloth up, turning it into a streaming banner. It caught the attention of quite a few of the people nearby, particularly the characters written on it. Pill Cultivation Workshop Outlet. The dark green characters seemed to flash, causing the facial expressions of the nearby Reliance sect disciples to change. Some seemed astonished, others confused. Some sneered and others frowned. Pill Cultivation Workshop Outlet. What does that mean? Don't tell me that guy is an apprentice alchemist sent by the sect's Pill Cultivation Workshop. He looks familiar. Discussions broke out on the plateau after Meng Hao revealed the flag. But after a bit of time passed, the fighting and robbing resumed. Blood showered and screams rang out. Meng Hao's eyes shone as he looked about at the people in the public zone. Not far off from him were two cultivators of the second level of qi condensation, locked in combat, their eyes red. One of them had a shoulder sliced open by his opponent's flying sword. Blood showered out, and he seemed to be in quite a difficult position. "Brother, come here," called out Meng Hao. "Brother," the sages said, "it is unwise to risk one's life when injured. You seem to be bleeding quite profusely from your shoulder. It won't benefit you to let yourself be killed. I happen to have a blood coagulation pill here from the Pill Cultivation Workshop. It can heal all of the sword wounds on your body in less time than it takes to take 3 breaths." As Meng Hao made his sales pitch, the two fighting men ignored him and continued to fight. The injured cultivator's eyes grew redder, and the wound on his shoulder grew worse. Then, blood poured from his chest as his opponent's flying sword hit him again. "Look, you got wounded again," admonished Meng Hao of his first potential customer. "Quick, come buy a blood coagulation pill. Otherwise, you might be defeated. All you have to do is give me 1 spirit stone, and I'll give you the blood coagulation pill. It's definitely worth it." "Shut up," roared the injured cultivator, retreating a pace. The Pill Cultivation Workshop is a rip-off, but they charge 1 spirit stone for 5 blood coagulation pills. You're even worse. "AI, it's not expensive. Your life is much more precious than a spirit stone. If you die, then all your spirit stones will belong to someone else. All you have to do is buy some of my medicine, and then you'll have the chance to win and snatch your opponent's bag of holding, all for the price of a single spirit stone. Is that expensive? You're not buying medicine, you're buying your own life. Meng Hao stood. Perhaps his words had affected the wounded cultivator. He struggled backwards a few paces, hesitation showing on his face. "Damn it!" roared the man's opponent, pointing his flying sword. "If you mess things up for me, then after I kill this guy, I'll come after you." "I'll buy it," said the injured man, slapping his bag of holding and producing a spirit stone, which he shot toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao snatched it out of the air and tossed back a blood coagulation pill. The cultivator grabbed it and placed it onto his shoulder wound. It stopped bleeding almost immediately. Refreshed, his spirit enlivened, he leaped back into the fight. Suddenly, his opponent retreated, blood flowing out from his wounded chest. Brother, said Meng Hao, switching customers. "Your opponent bought one of my blood coagulation pills and is now brimming with energy. I think if you don't buy one as well, you will be facing much peril. I don't just have blood coagulation pills. I also have skeletal relaxation pills to counter fatigue. I'll give you one each for 2 spirit stones. That will guarantee you healing and plenty of energy. You'll definitely be able to achieve victory." You, said the first man indignantly. He didn't know what to say. Was this pill cultivation workshop outlet pill boy here to help him or hurt him? He had just gone from a miserable situation to one of hope. Then this happened. He attacked more incisively in his indignation. The scene playing out in front of him was exactly the same as when he had bought his medicine. "If you win, then you're actually spending someone else's spirit stones on the medicine," said Meng Hao enticingly, holding the medicinal pills in his hands. "It's really worth it." "I'll take it," said the man who had already bought a pill. "Damn it, give it to me," said the cultivator who had originally held the upper hand. Despite his hatred for Meng Hao, hearing the other man demand the medicine caused him to grit his teeth and open his mouth. "I'll give 3 spirit stones." "Brother, he's offering 3. If you can't top that, I'll have to give the medicine to him. Take care." "I'll give 4. "Brother, he's offering 4. 4. 5. 6. "Damn it, I give up, die." The cultivator who had originally held the upper hand turned on Meng Hao, furious. At first, the battle had been quite simple. But once Meng Hao got involved, everything got complicated. He flew toward Meng Hao, murderous intent filling his face, clearly aiming to exterminate him. As he neared, Meng Hao's visage, meek, scholarly, and businesslike, suddenly changed, growing somber and stern. Just before the cultivator reached him, he took a step forward, his right palm slapping forward. Spiritual energy poured out with a bang. The cultivator flew back with a shriek, overwhelmed by the spiritual energy of Meng Hao's 3rd level of qi condensation. The attack had struck him unconscious. Meng Hao snatched his bag of holding, and then his somber, stern expression changed, and he was once again the weak scholar. All the onlookers were shocked. "Brother, I believe you just offered me 6 spirit stones," he said shyly, looking a bit embarrassed. The other cultivator's face paled, and his body trembled. He stared at Meng Hao with astonishment and terror. How could he ever have imagined that things would turn out this way? How could this apparently weak and feeble person have changed so much? It was almost as if what he had just witnessed was a dream. Chapter 12. Hello, Elder Sister Sue. The scene, which had attracted the attention of the other nearby cultivators, caused their expressions to change. Many seemed to be at a loss, unsure of exactly what had happened. But now they all knew that Meng Hao was not someone to provoke. Even though they didn't know exactly what had happened, Meng Hao's trembling first customer did. His heart pounding madly, he slapped his bag of holding and produced 6 spirit stones, which he respectfully handed over. He regretted having hesitated in front of the pill cultivation workshop in the past. By fretting over his spirit stones at that time, he'd ended up with no medicine. And now, he didn't have any spirit stones to go buy anything for himself. Meng Hao accepted the spirit stones, produced a blood coagulation pill and skeletal relaxation pill, and gave them to the man. "Many thanks for your patronage," he said with a wide smile. "Come back again soon." Once again he looked weak and feeble, but to the cultivator standing in front of him, he was a vicious beast in sheep's clothing. Trembling, the man made his exit. As he left, Meng Hao decided not to return to his spot on the rock. He grabbed the pill cultivation workshop outlet banner and began to stroll about the public zone. He stopped next to 2 battling disciples, sticking the banner into the ground. "Brother, it seems you're injured," he said, stepping forward. "You also seem somewhat listless. You don't seem to be in the right state to be fighting." The 2 disciples stared at him in amazement. Having just seen him knock someone out, they hesitated, and at the same time, both backed up a bit. "I happen to have some spirit refreshment pills from the pill cultivation workshop. Take one, and you will be completely reinvigorated, your victory guaranteed. Since today is our opening day of business, it only costs 1 spirit stone. How convenient." Meng Hao continued to walk forward, his face filled with sincerity. "I already have some medicinal pills," said the man he had been giving his sales pitch to. He slapped his grab of holding, and a spirit refreshment pill appeared, which he popped into his mouth. Upon seeing this, Meng Hao sighed. He had watched his first customer for some time before determining that he had no medicinal pills. With a light cough, he looked at the second man standing in front of him. The man gave a cold harumph, then produced his own medicinal pill and swallowed it, sighing inwardly. But Meng Hao wasn't disheartened. He circled back to the boulder, continuing to watch the 2 of them. As time passed, they seemed to be looking worse and worse off. Soon, it was clear they were out of medicinal pills, and the critical juncture in the fight had arrived. Victory and defeat would be decided. His spirits risen again, Meng Hao hefted the banner and approached them again. "Brothers, the moment of life or death has arrived. You don't have any medicinal pills left, but don't worry, I have some right here. At this critical juncture, buy one of my soul-congealing pills. It will restore your energy in a flash and even recover your spiritual energy. Brothers, you're not buying a medicinal pill, you're buying spiritual energy. Ayo, you're injured." Meng Hao's words distracted the cultivators. A flying sword hit one of them in the arm, sending out a fountain of blood. He retreated backward with a scream. Meng Hao was even faster than him, following and continuing his speech, looked as weak and scholarly as ever. "Brother, now is the time. You're bleeding profusely. Quick, buy a blood coagulation pill. If you don't, the danger is just too great. Get out of here." The man's opponent roared at Meng Hao. He charged his injured opponent. "Give me a pill," said the injured cultivator, his face pale. Retreating several paces, he gritted his teeth and pulled out a spirit stone. A blood coagulation pill shot from Meng Hao's hand onto the wound on the man's arm. The blood flow began to slow. He focused his attention, then leaped back into the fight. "Hey, brother, it seems you're out of medicinal pills. Look, I have plenty. Now that your opponent bought one, he's bursting with energy. But you're injured. Why don't you buy a blood coagulation pill?" "Oh no, you got slashed again. You must be really tired. Take it slow and don't be discouraged. Brother, I still have a skeletal relaxation pill." 1 spirit stone for 1 pill. You should buy pills quickly. The sages said, spirit stones have a price, but a life is priceless. Meng Hao slowly circled them. Sure enough, they were out of medicinal pills, and soon they began buying. Feeling pressure from each other, they bought quite a few. The battle grew more serious. Their fighting today was more intense than 4 or 5 normal battles. Originally, it had been a fairly simple fight, but with the pill cultivation workshop outlet here, things were complicated. With dangerous fighting comes injury. The two cannot be separated. Flop, flop. The two men had finally exhausted every scrap of energy. They dropped to the ground, unconscious, spirit stones spent, and medicinal pills eaten up. Even their magical items were destroyed in the battle, seemingly together along with their wits. How tragic. As far as Meng Hao was concerned, he had saved their lives, or at least one life. Hefting his banner, he once again strolled around the plateau and once again found two cultivators locked in devastating combat. From the look of it, even if they had healing medicine, it was gone by now. Eyes glistening, he stood the banner up next to the two of them. Brothers, your complexions seem bad, and you've received some serious injuries. But fear not, I have medicinal pills. 1 spirit stone buys 1 pill. Your recovery is guaranteed. How come you aren't saying anything? Don't tell me you don't trust me. Just now another disciple bought some of my pills. The result for his opponent was death. Shortly, each of the men bought a pill, then again, and again, until they had no more spirit stones left. After much bitter battling, they ended their fight in a tie, with nothing to show for it except empty bags of holding. Meng Hao shook his head, picked up the banner, and found a new place to do business. By the time the sun set, Meng Hao had been everywhere in the public zone, selling medicinal pills. In the end, wherever he went, the battling would instantly cease, and the participants would leave. Eventually, Meng Hao stared out over an empty public zone. Contentedly patting his bag of holding, he left. It was late at night when he arrived at the Immortal's cave. He sat down cross-legged and excitedly began to take inventory of his spoils. 1, 2. He grew more and more excited as he counted. Altogether, I have 53. I'm rich. This method is much faster than robbing people. It's also much safer. No need for killing. I don't have many medicinal pills left, so tomorrow I'll go to the pill cultivation workshop and buy some more. If I want the business to do well, I should buy out all of this month's healing medicines. If I don't have enough spirit stones, I'll just buy as much as I can. The scarcer the pills, the easier they'll be to sell. Meng Hao opened the bag of holding he had taken from the unconscious cultivator. Inside were a few spirit stones, 2 spirit condensation pills, and a pink-colored medicinal pill. He held the pill up and examined it. He recognized it as one of the pill cultivation workshop's cosmetic cultivation pills, an expensive pill. It was worth about 10 spirit condensation pills and could be considered one of the most expensive products available. This pill is designed to maintain one's physical appearance. It would be a waste for me to use it on myself. He figured the previous owner must have been trying to ingratiate himself to a female disciple. Not thinking any more on the subject, he put the pill into his bag of holding. As he was looking down contentedly at all the spirit stones and medicinal pills, the main door of the Immortal's cave suddenly creaked and began to open. It happened so quickly, Meng Hao had no time to gather up all his spoils. A woman entered, surrounded by a halo of moonlight. She was beautiful, but cold and expressionless. She wore a long silver robe that made it seem as if she had donned the moon itself. It was none other than the Reliance inner sect's elder sister Sue. As she entered the Immortal's cave, moonlight fell onto the spirit stones and medicinal pills which lay in front of Meng Hao. A sliver of astonishment suddenly cut through her cold demeanor. "Greetings, elder sister Sue," said Meng Hao, scrambling to his feet. His right hand swept up the spirit stones and medicinal pills. He stood there, looking embarrassed. Elder sister Sue didn't say anything. She just looked at Meng Hao, nodded, then turned to leave. Looked surprised, Meng Hao followed after her. "Elder sister Sue, you took the trouble to come here. Why not stay a bit?" "There's no need," she replied coldly. "I'll be going into secluded meditation starting tomorrow, and I just wanted to check in on you." She looked him over, then walked out of the cave. Meng Hao felt embarrassed, regretting having not collected up the spirit stones more quickly. In that case, he would have looked a bit worse off, and perhaps elder sister Sue would have been willing to help him out some more. At the same time, he felt a bit of warmth in his heart. Elder sister Sue appeared cold and indifferent, but she had come here to see him, which meant she remembered him. His heart thumping, he slapped his bag of holding and produced the pink-colored medicinal pill. "I've been wanting to thank you, elder sister Sue. I saved up quite a bit of spirit condensation pills so that I could trade them for this cosmetic cultivation pill. Please accept it. In my eyes, only you are worthy of such a pill. From the moment I entered the sect, I've had a dream that you would stay young forever and be eternally beautiful." Without so much as a wink, he solemnly and respectfully held out the pill. Elder sister Sue stopped walking and looked back at him. She glanced silently at the pill in his hand, then accepted it. Even though spirit condensation pills are common in the sect, they are only effective up to the 5th level of chi condensation. We cultivators place much importance on our cultivation base. We live in the world of cultivation, a place where life and death hang in the balance. You can't be like this in the future. You may be intelligent, but you need to work more on your cultivation. This was the first time Meng Hao had heard elder sister Sue speak so much. As she spoke, he nodded respectfully. "As long as elder sister Sue likes it, I'm willing to trade for it," he said, lowering his head and blinking. He looked a bit shy. "This pill, I'll accept it this time, but next time don't trade your pills like this." She put the pill away, hesitated for a moment, then pulled out a pink-colored jade pendant which she handed to Meng Hao. "This is a magical item," she said. "You need to protect yourself." She began to walk down the mountain. "Many thanks, elder sister Sue," said Meng Hao. "Would you allow me to accompany you while you walk? I haven't seen you for so long, and I have some questions regarding cultivation that I hope you can clear up for me." He knew that this was an important opportunity. This was the only person he had to rely on, so he needed to get close to her. If he could walk with her through the outer sect and be seen by others, perhaps fewer people would be willing to mess with him in the future. Elder sister Sue hesitated. She was an indifferent person and usually didn't say much. She had never spent time with male sect members, and it felt a bit strange to have Meng Hao standing there next to her. She was about to refuse, but after he finished speaking, she thought bashfully of the cosmetic cultivation pill he had given her, and she nodded quietly. The moon shone down gently on the two of them as they walked. Just then, at the peak of the North Mountain, a tall old man stood up, clad in a grey robe. As he looked down on the scene, a look of admiration appeared on his face. "Excellent. This pup Meng Hao isn't bad at all. He truly grasps the correct interpretation of the Reliance sect. He knows how to find someone to rely on. And he also knows that if he protects his relationship with that person, then he will always have someone to rely on." This was the same old man who had expressed admiration for Meng Hao on pill distribution day. The more he learned about Meng Hao, the more he liked him. Chapter 13. Manly Cao Yang. Elder Sister Sue was like a tiger pelt, which, when worn while strolling about the outer sect, would immediately attract attention. When the outer sect disciples saw Elder Sister Sue walking with Meng Hao, strange expressions filled their faces. This was especially true for those who had bought medicines from Meng Hao earlier that day. Hatred blossomed and then was held back. As for those with higher-level cultivation bases, they didn't know what had happened on the plateau, but they still recognized Meng Hao and conjectured that he was not someone to be trifled with. Actually, Meng Hao didn't know it, but he had become a rather famous person in the outer sect in the past 2 months. As far as he was concerned, the most important thing was getting through each day. Right now it was night, and not many disciples were about. Not even half of them saw the scene play out. Realizing that his opportunity was not easy to come by and shouldn't be lost, Meng Hao prattled on with some of his best humble scholar's words. He led taciturn elder sister Sue to the pill cultivation workshop, where the middle-aged man, both nervous and anxious, sold him all of the various healing pills at a very low price. It would take months to restock the amount of pills he took. They even went to the treasure pavilion. When elder sister Sue stared ferociously at the shrewd-looking man, his face grew pale. He surreptitiously slipped a spirit stone to Meng Hao and indicated that he could exchange the copper mirror at any time. Meng Hao gave a cold harumph, looking detested, and told the man that he'd lost the mirror ages ago. The treasure pavilion brother laughed bitterly and apologized. He told him not to worry, that the mirror had been lost in the past and was always found again within 2 or 3 years. At the foot of the East Mountain, Meng Hao watched elder sister Sue walk off into the distance, surrounded by moonlight. That was the first time he realized that she was actually incredibly beautiful, like some sort of immortal goddess. Too bad she's so cold. Otherwise, I would think about marrying her. He fantasized idly for a bit, then gave a few dry coughs and headed back to the Immortal's cave. The night passed by uneventfully, and early the next day, as the first rays of dawn appeared, Meng Hao energetically made his way to the plateau. I'm just a sliver away from the peak of the third level of qi condensation. It's too bad I don't have the right medicinal pills. Demonic cores aren't easy to get, and I would have to go to that black mountain, which is just too dangerous. As he walked, an idea began to form. My goal now is to collect spirit stones. Then, the next time I can get a demonic core, I will be able to make a massive leap of progress. If I can get to the 5th level of qi condensation. His heart began to thump, and his eyes shined with anticipation. Being of the 5th level in the outer sect makes you a kind of lord, and most importantly, you can use the wind-walking technique. Meng Hao thought back to elder brother Wang Tengfei and how he was able to hover 7 inches above the ground, and his heart beat even faster. Soon, the plateau appeared in front of him, and he hurried forward. Looking every bit the humble scholar, he sat down cross-legged on the boulder. Soon, more and more cultivators appeared, including some who hadn't been present the day before. The sounds of battle filled the air, along with blood-curdling screams. Meng Hao scanned the scene, trying to pick out his first potential customer of the day. He didn't notice that in another part of the public zone, a man was carefully making his way through the crowd. The cultivator walked slowly, looking all around. Suddenly, his gaze fell onto Meng Hao, and his body trembled. He stopped walking. This was Meng Hao's first customer from the day before. He had personally witnessed Meng Hao knock down his opponent, then act bashful afterwards. He hadn't expected him to return today, yet there he was. How come he's still here? That swindler. His wares are simply too expensive. The cultivator felt both hatred and fear. Heaving a sigh, he was about to leave, when suddenly his eyes caught sight of a manly disciple entering the public zone. It's Cao Yang. He's at the peak of the second level, just a step away from the third. His cousin Lu Hang is the #1 disciple in the low-level public zone. Thanks to him, Cao Yang can bully people and use despicable tactics to hurt people when fighting. People get angry, but won't say anything. If it were anyone else, people would have ganged up on him long ago. He didn't show up yesterday, so things went relatively smoothly. Today's going to be good. The cultivator moved a bit closer, convinced that Cao Yang would end up provoking the guy from the pill cultivation workshop outlet. Considering he hated both of them, he looked forward eagerly to their misery. Some of the nearby combatants caught sight of Cao Yang, and their expressions changed. They stepped aside quickly, afraid of incurring the wrath of the manly disciple. Cao Yang snorted coldly. He was tall, tough, and starky. His cold, hard stare was intimidating, as if the low-level public zone was his own backyard. Other than 2 or 3 people who he didn't want to mess with, he looked down on everyone. Frowning, he wondered why he hadn't seen his good friend Zhao Wugeng lately. This made his mood sour, so he stalked about looking for a newbie to steal medicinal pills from. Then his gaze fell upon Meng Hao, and the big banner sticking up next to him. At first, he had barely noticed him, but then he saw the gloating cultivator watching on in the distance, and his interest was piqued. "Go, go, quickly," said the cultivator under his breath. He suddenly realized that watching the fighting was a lot more interesting than participating in it. Perhaps his mumblings had some effect, because Cao Yang rolled his eyes and then strode over to Meng Hao. People hurried to get out of his way. Meng Hao sat on the boulder, looking as resolute as ever, preparing to hawk his medicines. But as he saw Cao Yang approaching, he realized he could not accomplish his goal. He raised his head, feeling a bit of pity. This man was no stranger to him. He was the violent man he had seen a few days ago. Meng Hao sat there, a weak scholar. Looking bashful and a bit ardent, he said, "Brother, it's our second day in business. All pills are in stock, and each one is essential for battle. Would you like to buy some?" Cao Yang looked him over, but was unable to estimate his cultivation base. If a person's qi condensation level is below the 7th, then unless they intentionally emit spiritual energy, their cultivation base will be motionless, and it is impossible to see how powerful they are. Only at the 7th level of qi condensation does it become visible to others. Therefore, he had no way to know Meng Hao's level. "When I buy things, I don't need to spend money. Hand over all your medicinal pills and spirit stones. If you dally, I'll snap your neck." His eyes flashed, and his tone was utterly forceful and domineering. After all, this was the low-level public zone, and everyone here revered him. His cousin was Lu Hang. As far as he was concerned, Meng Hao was nobody. Off in the distance, Meng Hao's first customer watched the proceedings eagerly. "Beat him to death, beat him to death," he said quietly. Even he didn't know which party he was referring to. "Brother," the sages said, "it is not good to steal," said Meng Hao delicately. "Look, let's discuss things a bit. I'm running a business here, but I haven't even opened shop yet. How could I have spirit stones already?" "Sages, on this plateau I am the sage," Cao Yang said, feeling even more confident after hearing Meng Hao speak. "If I want to beat you, who will stop me? If I want to cut you to pieces, who would even utter a peep?" Assuming Meng Hao was scared, he laughed heartily and took a step forward. He was very close now, and his eyes radiated insolence. "Brother, I didn't do anything to provoke you. Furthermore, I'm not in the public zone. Look, I'm outside the borders." Pulling a long face, Meng Hao stood up on the boulder, trying to speak reasonably. "You really can talk crap," said manly Cao Yang impatiently. "If I say you're inside, then you're inside." He stepped past the banner, then swiped his hand at Meng Hao. What a bully! When he saw Manly Cao Yang's hand moving, Meng Hao's countenance flickered, and he seemed to change into a different person. As Cao Yang moved forward, so did he, and his right palm shot out. A bang sounded out, then a horrific scream came out of Manly Cao Yang's mouth, followed by a fountain of blood. His body flew back some distance, his face filled with astonishment. His cultivation level was higher than that of the cultivator Meng Hao had struck yesterday, so he didn't lose consciousness. But pain racked his body. Even as he attempted to struggle to his feet, Meng Hao appeared next to him and kicked him viciously into the ground. The sages said, if you take things without paying, you're courting death. I told you I'm running a business, and I haven't opened shop yet. I don't have any spirit stones. As he spoke, he continued to ruthlessly trample Cao Yang. The manly man's shrill, miserable shrieks sounded out over the plateau, punctuating Meng Hao's each and every word. He protected his head with his hands, rolling about. Soon, footprints covered his green robe. I told you I was outside the public area, not inside, said Meng Hao furiously. The manly man's horrible cries began to grow weak, and it seemed that soon he wouldn't even have the energy to cry out at all. The onlooking cultivators all seemed to suck in their breath, looking at Meng Hao raging in all his fury. A few of them had been present the day before, and they started to think that they had struck it lucky. The one who understood things the most was yesterday's first customer. Looking at Manly Cao Yang screaming and watching Meng Hao's fierce expression as he jumped up and down, he suddenly began to sweat and quiver. The longer he watched, the more he felt that Meng Hao was truly frightening and dangerous. It appeared that Cao Yang was about to lose consciousness. The shadow of death seemed to float over him. His vision began to grow dim. Then he rose up his left hand, trembling. In it was a spirit stone. I'll buy some medicine, he cried. He mustered all his strength to cry out as loud as possible, apparently afraid that Meng Hao wouldn't hear him. Meng Hao stopped, his foot in midair. His fierce expression flickered away, replaced with the innocent scholar S. With a genial smile, he took the spirit stone. Why didn't you say so earlier? He helped Cao Yang to his feet, brushing the dusty footprints off his robe. His manly body trembled, and he stared fearfully at Meng Hao. Looking at him, Cao Yang wanted to leave immediately, to get as far away as possible from the demon in human clothing. As of now, he was just like the cultivator from yesterday. Brother, looking at your current state, I think one medicinal pill will only help you temporarily. He gripped Cao Yang by the shoulders. He seemed to stop in consideration for a moment. You have a lot of enemies. Why don't you buy some more? Chapter 14. Threats. Upon hearing this, Cao Yang's body went stiff. It wasn't just him. Everyone backed up, looking at Meng Hao in dread. Buy some more, said Cao Yang, shaking, his voice weak. Were it not for Meng Hao holding him up, he would have toppled over. One pill, one spirit stone, said Meng Hao affably. He retrieved several anti-hemostasis pills from his bag of holding. I'm honest with all customers, brother, please rest at ease. I won't take advantage of your misfortune to raise prices. Just ask any of the brothers nearby. The pill cultivation workshop outlet's reputation is quite good. Seeing all the pills, Cao Yang's face paled, and then he looked at the amiable expression on Meng Hao's face, and his back grew cold. Heart trembling, he gritted his teeth. Brother, you can really tell the good from the bad. These are genuine pill cultivation workshop products. As he spoke, he produced some blood coagulation pills and held them out. Cao Yang looked at the medicinal pills with a start, then glanced bitterly at Meng Hao's bag of holding. He looked back at Meng Hao's face and saw it filled with care and concern. Cao Yang wasn't stupid, and he understood Meng Hao's intentions. The blood drained from his heart. But right now his life was the most important thing, and he had no other options. He took out more spirit stones from his bag of holding and reluctantly handed them over. Meng Hao took them with a smile, then placed the medicinal pills into Cao Yang's hand one by one. In a short period of time, the spirit stones in Cao Yang's bag of holding had been replaced by a pile of medicinal pills. Cao Yang's heart bled even more. Looking pained, he trembled. Then he saw that Meng Hao still held 5 pills in his hand, and a look of shock and desperation filled his face. Those other pills should be enough to help you recover. These 5 are for after that, to help you maintain your health. He spoke considerately as he gazed at Cao Yang. I don't have any left, I really don't. Cao Yang said, looking at Meng Hao, about to cry. Meng Hao said nothing, looking as amiable as ever. Cao Yang's scalp tingled. Gritting his teeth and ignoring his own distress, he pulled out some magic items, including flying swords, magic wands, spirit condensation pills, and the like. I have no spirit stones, only these things, he said desperately. Magic items are also acceptable, said Meng Hao, taking them and putting them into his bag of holding. Moments later, Cao Yang, carrying his bundle of medicinal pills, hobbled off, supported by the arms of some fellow disciples. Meng Hao patted his bag of holding contentedly. It was only morning, and he had already sold out. He decided that it was best to quit while he was ahead, so he collected his flag and told the remaining cultivators he would see them tomorrow. Conversations broke out as he strode down from the plateau. Half a month flashed by, during which time Meng Hao grew to be quite famous among the low-level disciples. They all knew about the pill cultivation workshop outlet on the plateau. Even more talked about was the owner of the shop, who looked like a delicate scholar, but who had an explosive temper. Rumors spread. One afternoon, Cao Yang walked out of his house, his face pale. Despite his poor complexion, his wounds had healed. The pills he had bought from Meng Hao at an exorbitant price were actually quite effective in helping him to recover. He had hidden away for the past half-month, and today was the first day he had been able to walk around. He looked hesitant at first, but finally walked through the outer sect, eventually reaching an area with few buildings. He stopped in front of one of them. Cao Yang requests an audience with elder brother Lu, he said, standing outside and clasping his hands in front of him respectfully. Sitting inside, cross-legged, was a man of about 30 years of age wearing a green robe. He was not a handsome man, but had an appearance of excessive arrogance. His eyes flickered open, and he looked out at Cao Yang appraisingly. What transpired? He said coolly. Well, elder brother Lu, I was robbed a few days ago. Cao Yang blurted it out, feeling nervous. People outside said that elder brother Lu was his cousin, but in reality, they were not related. Elder brother Lu usually meditated in seclusion and did not really care about Cao Yang at all. He knew that whenever Cao Yang had some hardship, he would come calling. Hearing his words, elder brother Lu seemed a bit annoyed. Who was it that robbed you? He asked coolly. It was an outer sect disciple named Meng Hao, replied Cao Yang. Meng Hao. Elder brother Lu thought for a moment. He's completely ignorant and incompetent, said Cao Yang hatefully. But he opened up a shop on the plateau, hawking medicinal pills to disciples who get injured in battle. Hawking medicinal pills. said elder brother Lu with a frown. His eyes flickered. Yeah, now he's one of the most famous disciples in the low level. He opened up that shop and then forces people to buy from him. Now, everyone is complaining and ashamed to be associated with him at all. They all despise him. He's aroused the wrath of heaven and earth. I beg elder brother Lu to administer justice. Anger covered Cao Yang's face as he thought about his own wretched experience that day. Actually, elder brother Lu didn't care at all about the things Cao Yang had just said, and yet his eyes shone. My cultivation base has reached this level because of all the low-level disciples I robbed. How come in all my years in the Reliance sect, I never thought to open a store and hawk medicinal pills? He sighed and slapped his thigh. Upon hearing the noise from inside, Cao Yang stared in confusion at the building, not sure what it meant. He didn't dare to ask. Moments later, elder brother Lu sent him away, with no assurance whatsoever that he would aid him in seeking vengeance. The following morning at dawn, Meng Hao headed toward the plateau carrying his banner. He was in a good mood. He had grown accustomed walking the path to the plateau. When he reached it, he sat down on the boulder. As soon as he appeared, the faces of the other cultivators on the plateau grew pale. In the past half-month, they had been tormented by Meng Hao until they were completely dispirited. But if they didn't come, how could they rob from other disciples? Killing outside of this area was not permitted, so they had no choice but to come. What they usually did was stop fighting as soon as Meng Hao showed up. But people's killing spirit would inevitably arise, animosities would be stoked. Even though Meng Hao's business had slowed, he still made profit. It is worth mentioning that ever since Meng Hao opened his shop, there were much fewer deaths. He was quick to point this out, and it had become a key feature of his sales pitch. As usual, Meng Hao looked about for potential customers. He thought to himself that this really wasn't the best method. The shopkeepers in Yunji County always had assistants. Even as a new idea was coalescing in his mind, he caught sight of a man in the distance, about 30 years old. He looked extremely arrogant, and in his hand he held a banner which looked just like Meng Hao's. Written on the banner were several large characters. Pill Cultivation Workshop, Outlet Number 2. This was Lu Hang, the #1 disciple in the lower level. His cultivation base was similar to Meng Hao's, just a hair away from the peak of the 3rd level. Meng Hao glanced at him, then paid him no attention. Of course, there would always be imitators in business, although Meng Hao wasn't too pleased with the name on the banner. The other cultivators on the plateau looked at each other for a moment, then went back to their fighting. About an hour later, Meng Hao caught sight of 2 combatants. He hurried over and planted his banner next to them. At the same time, Lu Hang hurried over and planted his banner. As the 2 banners were planted, the combatants dripped with cold sweat. As far as they were concerned, the people standing there were very powerful. Normally, one would be enough to make them uncomfortable, but here were 2, standing there staring. "Brother, buying a medicinal pill will ensure your safety," said Meng Hao hurriedly. "1 spirit stone per pill. I treat all customers fairly. Buy Lu's pills, they're just as effective," said Lu Hong from the other side. He looked at the 2, murderous intent flashing briefly in his eyes. The 2 combatants trembled down to their guts, having lost any desire to fight. They produced spirit stones and handed them over to Lu Hong, then raced off. Meng Hao frowned. This was clearly robbery, and if things went on like this, the public zone would soon be empty. That wasn't his desire. By afternoon, Meng Hao's business had dropped significantly. Other than an order in the morning, he sold nothing at all. Lu Hang, who didn't care a bit about right and wrong, forced people to buy. If they didn't buy, then he attacked them. Soon, the plateau was completely empty. Lu Hang looked down at the dozen or so spirit stones he had acquired. He looked cool and indifferent on the outside, but inside he burned with excitement. This really is a good business. If I had thought of this before, I wouldn't have been made fun of for robbing so many lower-level disciples. If only that Meng Hao weren't here, I'm sick of him. He had not come because of Cao Yang, of course, but rather to imitate Meng Hao's business model. Now that he had a taste of it, he wanted to have the monopoly. He looked murderously at Meng Hao. I'll practice a few more days, he thought. Then kill him. The next day, thanks to Lu Hong's powerful reputation as the #1 disciple in the low level, few people showed up in the public zone. Those who did show up were ones who hadn't been present the day before. They had no choice but to buy medicinal pills. Meng Hao wasn't willing to do business like Lu Hong, so he didn't get a single order. The more Lu Hong looked at Meng Hao, the more his murderous intentions grew. By evening of the third day, when Meng Hao was making his silent exit, he heard Lu Hong's arrogant voice from behind him. The few people present all heard. If I see your banner tomorrow, I'll cripple your cultivation base. Meng Hao stopped for a moment. He said nothing, but his eyes filled with cold power. He stalked off, returning to the Immortal's cave. You're the one who copied me, said Meng Hao, his eyes fierce. Then you stole my business, like a turtle dove stealing the nest of a magpie. Then you say you'll cripple my cultivation base. Thinking of the murder in Lu Hong's eyes, Meng Hao pushed open the stone door of the second room in the Immortal's cave. Instantly, thick spiritual energy began to pour out. Meng Hao sat down cross-legged. He absorbed the several months' worth of accumulated spiritual energy. As dawn approached, he opened his flashing eyes. He had experienced a breakthrough. No longer was he a hair away from the peak, he was at the peak of the third level. Now he was just a step from the fourth. But that step was not an easy one. The higher one's cultivation base, the more difficult it was to progress, especially to the fifth and seventh levels. Those levels were often bottlenecks, extremely difficult. Meng Hao frowned, gritted his teeth, and forced himself to open the bag of holding and take out all of the spirit condensation pills he had earned recently. Then he used Copper Mirror's mystical ability, along with all his valuable spirit stones, to duplicate even more spirit condensation pills. Spirit condensation pills were of limited use, but with a large amount, there would be some effect. Each time he used this method, though, its efficacy would be reduced. If I don't cripple him first, he will destroy me tomorrow. Without hesitation, he popped the pills into his mouth. The spiritual energy in his body lacked a bit, so as the huge amount of spirit condensation pills dissolved, his body began to shake. He felt his cultivation base erupt like a flood. His mind hummed, and his consciousness faded a bit. When things grew clear, his eyes glittered. And yet, he still had not reached the fourth level of qi condensation. He ground his teeth. With no other choice, he duplicated more spirit condensation pills and swallowed them. Once, twice, 3 times. His mind vibrated violently, as if it were being smashed by turbulent waves. Then there was a bang, and his eyes grew blurry. Massive amounts of filth oozed out from his pores, and as it did, Meng Hao's vision slowly grew clearer, his body cleaner. After about an hour, his eyes glittered dazzlingly, and he was completely clear-headed. The fourth level of qi condensation. He felt his cultivation base roiling like a massive river. As he rotated it, it sounded like a roaring tempest, astonishing and frightening. His expression calm, he retrieved 5 flying swords from his bag of holding, spoils from the past half-month. They were all products of the treasure pavilion, standard issue, and all looked exactly the same. There were some other magical items which he had procured. He heaved a deep sigh, then closed his eyes and began to meditate, awaiting daybreak. After entering the sect and beginning my cultivation practice, I had no choice but to rob some people to improve my cultivation base. But I don't want to hurt too many people. Thus, I came up with the idea of running a business. But now my business has been stolen away, and I've been threatened with crippling that is pushing things too far. When dawn broke, Meng Hao opened his eyes and left the immortal's cave. He washed, then headed straight for the plateau. Chapter 15. Decisive Attack. Dawn, the plateau. Considering the months of Meng Hao's hawking and days of Lu Gong's domineering, there were few cultivators present, especially this early in the morning. There were only 2 or 3, sitting there cross-legged. When Meng Hao arrived, they opened their eyes, and each of them sighed inwardly, wondering when things would return to the way they had been before. Moments later, they gaped in astonishment. Meng Hao didn't enter the plateau, but instead sat outside, cross-legged, eyes closed. He remained there, unmoving. This strange sight left them astonished. They looked at each other, then seemed to remember something, whereupon they began to gloat. Time passed, and soon it was late into the morning. More and more people arrived on the plateau, and every single one noticed Meng Hao and his unusual behavior. People began to make guesses about what was going on. Everyone was so intrigued that none of them fought. Could it be that elder brother Lu's words really worked? Meng Hao is too scared, so he doesn't dare to hawk goods. It must be. Elder brother Lu is the #1 disciple in the low level. If he tells you to beat it, then you have no choice but to beat it. Who would have thought that this guy was so scared for his own skin? All he can do is bully people lower than him. Look at how arrogant he is. He thinks that just because he didn't bring his crappy banner, elder brother Lu will let him off the hook. Many of them were like this. They wouldn't complain when being robbed by someone powerful. But if someone who looked weak and kind took their items through business, they would complain endlessly. Lu Hang had been in power for quite a while. From his first vicious attack long ago, all the way to today, when he forced people to do business with him, everyone was helpless. And yet, they had no choice but to deal with the situation. In fact, many of them believed he had become a bit gentler recently. Meng Hao hadn't been in the sect for very long, and was neither very powerful nor arrogant. So even though his business was conducted gently, everyone complained relentlessly. Meng Hao heard all of their talking, but his expression remained as neutral as always. Of course, his reason for sitting in meditation outside the public zone was not because he didn't want to enter, but rather because his cultivation base was now at the 4th level of qi condensation, and he couldn't enter even if he wanted to. In the midst of all the discussion, someone appeared at the bottom of the mountain. He wore a green robe, looked to be about 30 years old, and wore an incredibly arrogant expression. It was Lu Hang, slowly approaching, his hands clasped behind his back. As soon as he appeared, Meng Hao's eyes opened, and they shone brilliantly. Everyone watched as he stood up and slapped his bag of holding. A small white sword appeared. The sword aura glistened, pressing down with a cold pressure. Meng Hao charged forward, and the sword aura made a beeline for Lu Hang. As soon as this happened, a buzz of conversation rose. Everyone was amazed at Meng Hao's lack of fear. Was he really going to cause trouble for the #1 low-level disciple, Lu Hang? He's going to battle Lu Hang. They were going to fight sooner or later. Meng Hao injured Cao Yang, and Lu Hang wrecked his business. This battle was unavoidable. I just never imagined Meng Hao would dare to attack like this. I think he doesn't know his own limitations. Elder brother Lu has been at the 3rd level for years. Meng Hao will definitely lose. Even as Meng Hao dashed forward, Lu Hang's eyes glittered. He'd already planned to take Meng Hao's head if he saw him today. And now, his opponent had dared to take the initiative. It was actually helpful. He snorted, and his body seemed to turn into a rainbow as he sped toward Meng Hao. His right hand slapped his bag of holding, and a purple-colored flying sword appeared. When the flying sword appeared, it was accompanied by a piercing whistle, and it radiated a golden-purple color with a diameter of approximately 30 meters. Its elder brother, Lu's purple yang sword. It is. I heard he was awarded the purple yang sword by the sect for some special service he did. It's mystically sharp. Two people, one mountain. At the foot of the mountain, they charged each other. Amidst a reverberating roar, Lu Hong's expression changed, and blood spurted from his mouth. He flew back several paces, staring at Meng Hao in shock. Fourth level of qi condensation. Meng Hao looked a bit embarrassed. He had just entered the fourth level of qi condensation, and his grasp of it was not firm. He could not release its full power. He had made a simple attack, filled with ferocity, but cracks were already visible on his flying sword. His opponent's weapon was magically sharp and had damaged his own weapon. Even though Meng Hao didn't have much experience in fighting, in his half-year or so hunting for wild beasts in the mountains, his reaction speed had grown. Furthermore, during his days on the plateau, he had observed many battles. Even as Lu Hong retreated backward, he moved forward, slapping his bag of holding. Another flying sword appeared next to the cracked sword. The two sword auras merged together and shot toward Lu Hong. As he sped forward, Meng Hao's fingers flickered and tongues of flame congealed all around him. 3 paces away, a flame serpent appeared, as thick as his arm, about half a meter long. It twisted in the air, then emitted a roar and shot toward Lu Hong. Looking shocked, Lu Hong spit blood from his mouth and moved backwards anxiously. His eyes flashed with anger. He knew that because he had some magical items, and Meng Hao had just entered the 4th level, the outcome of this battle was not certain. But if he could exterminate Meng Hao, it would build his prestige. Murderous intent flickered in his eyes. His fingers danced, whereupon a globe of glistening, radiant water appeared in his hands. He threw it out, whereupon it exploded, transforming into countless water arrows, which then shot toward the flame serpent. His fingers moved again, and the purple yang sword slammed into Meng Hao's 2 flying swords. A booming sound rang out like iron being crushed. Meng Hao's 2 flying swords crumbled into pieces, whereupon the purple yang sword followed the water arrows toward the flame serpent. With an echoing roar, the flame serpent disappeared into a cloud of dust. The water arrows became a mist, and the purple yang sword returned to Lu Hong. Its golden-purple aura did not shine quite as brightly, and a crack had appeared on its blade, but it was still as sharp as ever. With a 4th level qi condensation like that, and no good weapon, killing you isn't going to be hard. How many times can you use your flame serpent art like that, considering you aren't at the 5th level? In his heart, Lu Hong was worried about his flying sword, but outside, he put on a broad smile. He didn't take a single step back. Your sword might be incredibly sharp, but let's see how many times you can use it. Speaking of flying swords, I have some more, too. And as for the 5th level of qi condensation, with all the medicinal pills elder sister Su gives me, it won't be long before I break through. He showed no expression on his face, but inside Meng Hao was very nervous. This was his first real battle after all. He slapped his bag of holding, and 3 more flying swords appeared. They shot toward Lu Hong. Lu Hong looked worried for a moment, but he didn't hesitate for long. He roared, and then Meng Hao's 3 flying swords met his purple yang sword. Bang, 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 the 3 swords shattered. And yet, the purple yang sword's aura had diminished by at least half. More cracks had appeared on its surface, and Lu Hong looked incredibly worried. Before he could do anything, though, Meng Hao nonchalantly slapped his bag of holding 1 more time, and 3 more whizzing flying swords appeared. He waved his arm, and another flame serpent congealed into being. The onlookers were all shocked. Meng Hao, he's put elder brother Lu in a really tight spot. He's actually at the 4th level of qi condensation. He didn't enter the sect very long ago, and he's already at the 4th level of qi condensation. He's definitely at the 4th level. Look at how he's dealing with elder brother Lu. But how did his cultivation training go so quickly? What did elder sister Su give him to help him so much? Damn it, if I had someone like that to rely on, then maybe I would be able to progress so quickly in my cultivation. The crowd buzzed, their faces filling with powerful jealousy. Lu Hong's face changed again, and he retreated, grinding his teeth. His fingers flickered again, and another water globe appeared. He never imagined that his opponent would have so many magical items. A boom resounded as Meng Hao's 3 flying swords broke to pieces, along with the flame serpent. The purple yang sword's aura had now grown dark, but what shocked Lu Hong the most was Meng Hao's expressionless face as he suddenly produced 3 more flying swords. Another explosion rang out as the 3 swords broke apart. But then, the purple yang sword let out a plaintive cry, then crumbled to pieces. Lu Hong's eyes went wide, and he staggered backward, spitting out gobs of blood. He glared at Meng Hao. Meng Hao showed no emotion whatsoever, but inside he was extremely nervous. Every single flying sword was equal to a spirit stone. He waved his right hand, and yet another flame serpent appeared, roaring and twisting through the air around him. It flew toward Lu Hong. Meng Hao shot toward the retreating Lu Hong like a rainbow, accompanied by the flame serpent. Yet another flying sword appeared, and in an instant it was a meter away from Lu Hong, its sword aura glittering with death. "You forced me to do it," shouted Lu Hong, his hair in disarray, his clothes spattered with blood. From the day he had entered the sect until now, he had never been in such a bad situation. His eyes burned. With a growl, he tore open his robe, revealing a jadeite bottle gourd hanging from his neck. He poured into it all of the spiritual energy he could muster. The jadeite bottle gourd began to glow brightly, and a droning sound filled the air. In the air in front of Lu Hong, the image of a massive bottle gourd appeared, many times larger than the one hanging from his neck. It was about half the size of a person. Actually, Lu Hong's cultivation base was not strong enough to fully activate the bottle ground. The flickering image seemed as if it could dissipate at any moment. Before it could finish coalescing, Lu Hong spit out a mouthful of blood and retreated backwards again, his face deathly pale. And yet he still glared at Meng Hao with frenzied, murderous anger. Even though the bottle gourd was not complete, the pressurized spiritual energy inside caused Meng Hao's expression to suddenly change. Then, the illusory bottle gourd emitted a thunderous roar, and a thick green beam shot from its mouth, slamming through the flame serpent and inundating Meng Hao. "This is a magical item given to me by elder brother Wang Tengfei. It can be used when one reaches the 4th level of qi condensation. But you're just looking to die, Meng Hao, so you forced me to use it early, and I've had to pay the price. You're definitely dead this time." Lu Hong started to let out a wild laugh, and yet the laugh could not leave his mouth. He felt as shocked as if he had been struck by lightning. He stared in astonishment. The green beam slammed into Meng Hao, pushing him back about 10 meters. However, it was blocked by a pink shield which surrounded Meng Hao's body. When the green beam dissipated, so did the pink shield. It shrank into a pink jade pendant which Meng Hao held in his hand. Cracks covered its surface. He gripped the jade pendant, cold sweat dripping down his back, fear lingering in his heart. If he hadn't taken out the jade pendant elder sister Su had given him, he would have been destroyed by the fearsome power of the bottle gourd. What magical item is that? Meng Hao looked at the jadeite gourd bottle hanging from Lu Hong's neck, who was clearly severely injured. He leaped forward and snatched the gourd bottle, immediately putting it into his bag of holding. That was given to me by elder brother Wang Tengfei. If you dare to steal it, you will have to deal with his wrath. Lu Hang's countenance sank, and he began to tremble. He was filled with astonishment, never having imagined that the bottle gourd would be ineffective against this opponent. The sect rules state that if you take something into your hand, it is yours, said Meng Hao. He hesitated for a moment, but then decided that the bottle gourd was too powerful. He wouldn't give it back. Enmity had been created which would be difficult to abate. Hatred in his heart, he stared coldly at Lu Hang. "This isn't the public zone," said Lu Hang, his eyes filled with despair and fear. Raising his voice so everyone could hear, he said, "If you dare to kill me, it will be a violation of sect rules. I, Meng Hao, will not violate sect rules. However, you said yesterday that you would cripple my cultivation base. So today, I will do the same to you." Looking completely calm, he raised his hand and sent a flying sword piercing into the chi passages of Lu Hang's dantian, smashing his cultivation base. Then he stood there amidst Lu Hang's miserable screams, casting fear and awe across the entire plateau. Chapter 16. Come here. The faces of the surrounding cultivators grew pale. Meng Hao's attack was both decisive and also filled with a ferocious hatred that he himself didn't even notice. This sort of thing was actually becoming a trend. In the eyes of the onlookers, Meng Hao was now the #1 person of the plateau. Perhaps in the entire outer sect, he was now one of the highest figures. Many of the cultivators thought back to the past half-month. With a cultivation base so high, Meng Hao could have robbed and taken at will. True, the customers of his shop weren't happy, but he did treat them mildly. People now began to look at him with awe. There was no fighting on the plateau that day. After Meng Hao left, the news of Lu Hang's cultivation base being broken spread like the wind. The fact that he had mentioned Wang Tengfei's name was especially talked about and caused the news to spread even faster. By nightfall, everyone in the outer sect had heard about what happened, and by this point, everyone knew who Meng Hao was. The East Mountain, covered with wisps of colorful clouds, was the Reliance sect's tallest mountain and also the inner sect's base of activity. It had more spiritual energy than the other mountains, and was where sect leader He Luohua went for meditative seclusion. Back in the heyday of the Reliance sect, the four peaks had been fully occupied by the inner sect. Disciples of the 7th level of Qi condensation had abounded. Now, only the East Mountain was occupied by disciples Su and Chen, whereas the other peaks were abandoned. On the East Mountain, there was an Immortal's Cave, which was much larger than Meng Hao's. It was actually the finest Immortal's Cave in the entire outer Reliance sect, rivaling even the dwelling places of the inner sect disciples. Inside was a spirit spring that was anything but dried up. It gurgled out dense, fragrant spiritual energy. Of course, among all the disciples of the Reliance outer sect, the only one qualified to occupy such a place was the blessed Wang Tengfei. He sat cross-legged in his white robe, his face placid, looking at Lu Hang kneeling in front of him. Lu Hang's face was pale white, and his body trembled. His cultivation base had already been destroyed by Meng Hao. "I beg elder brother Wang to administer justice," he said with bated breath. "He's beyond cunning, more than you could imagine. He's going to flee the sect." Every time Lu Hang saw elder brother Wang, he could not help but feel that the other man was perfect, beyond ordinary. That feeling had grown stronger and stronger over the past 2 years, in which Wang Tengfei's cultivation base grew more and more powerful. "If he flees," said elder brother Wang after a while, resplendent in his perfection, It will be a violation of sect rules, and I will send some people to kill him." He wore an amiable smile which would cause anyone to like him, and spoke with a lightness that caused him to seem even nobler. Lu Hang had nothing more to say. He kowtowed, his face filled with entreaty, his body trembling uncontrollably. "Very well," said Wang Tengfei. "His methods are too vicious. An example should be made. I shall prevail upon elder brother Shangyuan and make a trip over there, although I will be careful not to offend elder sister Su. Meng Hao shall cripple his own cultivation base, distribute his treasures, and sever an arm and a leg. That shall be his apology. Good enough." He spoke as if he held sway over every single matter within the Reliance sect, as if with a single word he could take command over Meng Hao's cultivation base as well as his arms and legs. His smile was as amiable as ever, perfect and without flaw. "My profound thanks. This fellow, he's just filled with viciousness." Lu Hang ground his teeth, his heart filled with enmity. "Then I shall expel him from the sect," said Wang Tengfei coolly, as if he were talking about an incredibly insignificant matter. "He can go off into the wilds, and things will take their natural course." At that same moment, Meng Hao sat cross-legged in the Immortal's cave in the South Mountain, looking at the jadeite bottle gourd in his hands with a dark expression. Having broken through the 4th level of qi condensation, then fighting that battle, he had consumed almost all of his spiritual energy. There was nearly none left. At least he had obtained the magical gourd. It seemed as though everything had gone smoothly since his entrance into the Reliance sect, but actually it was mostly because of his quick wit and foresight. If it had been anyone other than him, he would most likely have put his life in danger on his first pill distribution day. Later, he acquired the protection of the copper mirror and its mysterious power. Shortly after that, elder brother Zhao began to lust after his immortal's cave. If he hadn't died, Meng Hao's situation would have been bleak, and he would have lost control of all of his belongings. That was the first time he had killed someone. If he hadn't started doing business with his shop, he wouldn't have been able to arrive where he was now. But the wind that seemed to propel him from behind also held concealed within it hardships that he was unaware of. Everything that had happened was like the thunder of an approaching storm. Meng Hao looked down quietly at the jadeite bottle gourd, thinking about the number 1 disciple in the outer sect, blessed Wang Tengfei. Thinking of him in all his perfection, Meng Hao felt as if the pressure of an entire mountain had come to rest on him. He almost couldn't breathe. He wanted to flee, but he knew that he was no servant, but a sect disciple. Fleeing was a violation of sect rules. That would arouse the notice of the sect elders, and he would surely lose his life. If I'd known earlier that Lu Hang had Wang Tengfei backing him, muttered Meng Hao. Moments later, unswerving determination filled his eyes. "I would do the same thing. If I didn't attack him, he would have killed me. I didn't force him, he forced me. The grudge would have built either way. Unless I had run into Cao Yang earlier and been willing to let him rob me, things would have ended up this way. Even if it came down to killing, I couldn't prevent people from coveting my business." His eyes flashed as he looked gloomily around the Immortal's cave. "It's too bad elder sister Su is meditating in seclusion." The first thing he had done after crippling Lu Hang's cultivation base was to go looking for her. But he had been informed at the inner sect that parties in seclusion were not to be disturbed. This jadeite bottle gourd. It was incredibly powerful, so much so that when he tested it out with his cultivation base, it exploded out with a might that sent his heart thumping. He could only imagine how it could help him. Maybe now he would finally be able to break through to the 5th level of qi condensation. The strange thing was that the gourd bottle could not be placed in his bag of holding, but rather had to be hung on his body. Sadly, He had no more spirit stones. He had used all of them to break through the third level of qi condensation. Otherwise, he would try to make a copy of the gourd bottle. This sect is not of the mortal world. It's easy to lose one's life here. If I can prevent disaster by handing over the gourd bottle, maybe I should just do it. He did not wish to do so, but it seemed he had no other choice. Even as he wrestled with these thoughts, a sinister voice drifted in from the dark night, past the sealed door of the Immortal's cave. I am Shangyuan Song 1. Shangyuan Song's name in Chinese is Chinese letter, Shangguan Song. Shangyuan is a relatively obscure family name. Song is basically just a name, with no special meaning, here to assist elder brother Wang in meting out justice. Meng Hao, please come out of the Immortal's cave and kowtow to me. The dark voice seemed to fill the cave with icy cold shadow. Meng Hao's eyes glittered, and he lifted his head. He didn't look the least bit surprised. He had anticipated that someone would come looking for him. Meng Hao was silent for a moment, then slowly said, "It's late at night, not a convenient time. Elder brother, if you have something to say, just say it." "How haughty," said the voice, clearly displeased. A cold snort rang out. Meng Hao said nothing, maintaining his silence. "If you won't open the door, very well. I shall convey elder brother Wang's instructions." Meng Hao, disciple of the outer sect, has not focused wholeheartedly on cultivation. He has caused disturbances in the low-level public zone, arousing mass complaints from fellow disciples, and has used vicious methods on others. However, he is young, so these offenses cannot be considered worthy of the death penalty. Hand over your treasures, cripple your cultivation base, and leave the sect. Henceforth, you are not a disciple of the Reliance sect. As Meng Hao listened to the sinister voice, his face grew somber. Then, when he heard the final words, it filled with indignation. "Elder brother Wang's decrees are not according to sect rules," said Meng Hao defiantly. "Elder brother Wang's word are the sect rules," said the person outside, indifferent to Meng Hao's interruption. "The following day is pill distribution day. You will kowtow to Lu Hang and apologize, then await your punishment." With that, the man flicked his sleeve, turned, and left. Meng Hao sat in silent contemplation. Time passed and dawn approached. His eyes were bloodshot. He could not figure out what to do. His opponent obviously wanted the jadeite bottle gourd and to see him dead. Out of supposed to mercy, he would cripple his cultivation base, sever an arm and a leg, and then expel him from the sect into the wild mountains. If that happened, he would truly be hopeless. "What should I do?" he said, fists clenched, eyes red. He suddenly felt completely weak and helpless. This was the first time he truly wished he were more powerful. If he were more powerful, he wouldn't be bullied like this. He thought some more. "Don't tell me my only option is to flee." His eyes filling with determination, he lifted up his head and walked out of the Immortal's cave. But even as he walked out, he stopped in his tracks, hesitating. "No, this isn't right." He lowered his head for a moment in thought, then turned back into the Immortal's cave, where he sat down cross-legged. The following morning, Meng Hao opened his bloodshot eyes. He had not practiced any breathing exercises, but had spent the whole night in contemplation. But his cultivation base was simply too low. He couldn't think of any method other than fleeing the Reliance sect. But surely his opponent had considered that he would do that. Fleeing was the same as death, and then he would be remembered as a traitor. Bells rang out in the distance. Pill distribution day had arrived. Meng Hao knew that even if he tried to hide away in the Immortal's cave, catastrophe would still befall him. The law of the jungle. All of my problems are because my cultivation base is too low. A true man doesn't just take the suffering, he does something about it. He gave a small sigh. He had been pushed to the brink and had no room to maneuver. He calmed himself, then straightened out his clothing. He looked around the immortal's cave, then opened the main door and stared out at the blue sky and the emerald sea of trees. Some time passed, and then he stepped forward. He had only taken a few steps when he noticed a person walk out from the jungle behind him, staring at him coldly. "You didn't flee, so you aren't stupid after all." Meng Hao recognized the person's voice. It was Shangyuan's song. It turned out he had stayed behind. Meng Hao had seen him before. He was one of the disciples walking with Wang Tengfei that day by the East Mountain. His grandfather was one of the sect elders. He clearly had stayed behind to see if Meng Hao would flee. If he had, he would have been branded a traitor and would have forfeited his life. Meng Hao turned and headed toward the outer sect. Shangyuan Song laughed coldly, his eyes filled with ridicule. Actually, he had left the previous night to go call on his grandfather Shangyuan Ziu. Even had Meng Hao chosen to flee in the night, he would have been entrapped and suffered a horrible death. Shangyuan Song followed Meng Hao the entire way. When they arrived at the outer sect, other disciples caught sight, one by one, and many different expressions filled their faces. Regardless, it appeared as if all had expected this, and none seemed to take pity on Meng Hao. Most actually jeered at him. Soon he arrived at the outer sect square. The dragon-carved pillars glowed brightly, and disciples were everywhere. Off in the distance, he saw white-robed Wang Tengfei surrounded by a crowd of disciples. The sun shone down on his white robe, making it shine like snow, and his long hair trailed past his shoulders. He looked perfect, flawless, like an immortal being from a painting. His bearing made people want to get to know him. He really looked like a chosen. He chatted amiably with the disciples around him, friendly with everyone, regardless of their cultivation base. He would nod, giving tips about cultivation, causing everyone to treat him with utmost respect. The female disciples all seemed to be infatuated with him. They looked as if they needed to be at his side, as if his each and every action could drive them crazy. Even the sect elders on the tall platform gazed down on him fondly and with admiration. Wherever Wang Tengfei went, he became the center of attention. His good looks, his gentleness, his perfection melded together into a dazzling glow which burned Meng Hao's eyes. He clenched his fists tightly. As all the disciples arrived, and as the pill distribution concluded, gentle and cordial Wang Tengfei didn't even look once at Meng Hao. He knew Meng Hao was watching him, but it meant no more to him than if a cricket were looking at him. He wouldn't stoop so low as to return his gaze. When everything concluded, and the dragon-carved pillars grew dark, Wang Tengfei's gentle voice filled the air. "Come here." It was a simple sentence, but the instant it rang out, everyone looked at Wang Tengfei, watching as his gaze fell onto Meng Hao. Chapter 17. I shall rely on myself. Meng Hao stood there stiffly, staring at Wang Tengfei. He could suddenly feel the gaze of all the disciples who stood in the square. The cultivators standing next to him moved away, creating an open area around Meng Hao. A feeling of aloneness filled his heart, as if the world itself were about to forsake him. It was as if Wang Tengfei's single utterance had pushed him over the edge of existence. No one spoke a word. The outer sect disciples just looked at Meng Hao. Wang Tengfei was too famous. His words reverberated in everyone's hearts. No one was surprised at what was happening. News of yesterday's events had spread, and many people had already guessed what would happen this day. The sect elders remained unmoving upon the high platform, gazing down at Meng Hao. "Sect rules state that what you take belongs to you," said Meng Hao, forcing the words out one word at a time. He knew that compared to Wang Tengfei, his voice was laughably weak and small, and that he might be attacked, but he still spoke up. He knew that if he took out the jadeite gourd bottle, handed it over to Wang Tengfei, and made some tearful entreaties, then Wang Tengfei couldn't reject his apology. Not in front of all these people. He might exact some punishments, but would leave Meng Hao with his cultivation base. Maybe if he begged and kowtowed, admitted that he was in the wrong, accepted the humiliation and even insult himself, then he would be completely out of danger. But Meng Hao would never do such a thing. Call him stupid and crazy, but he would never do it. Even though he knew he was facing a dire calamity, he would never beg. He would never humiliate himself, would never crawl on the ground and plead. Never. This was his spirit, his integrity. Some things in the world are more important than life or death, and that noble, unbendable, unbreakable spirit is dignity. That was why he had spoken first, one word at a time. Even though his opponent was the mountain-like Wang Tengfei, even though he faced dire calamity, even though the whole world was against him, even though he was alone with no one to rely on. Despite all this, he still had his dignity. He lifted his head up and spoke. This was Meng Hao. His words seemed to galvanize all the energy in his body. Death. What is death? So what if I haven't even lived to see 17? You can humiliate me, you can cripple my cultivation, but you can never make me yield. You can never break my spirit. His voice had rung out in the silence, clear and distinct, yet filled with a certain loneliness. As he spoke, his bitterness was plain, but perhaps only Meng Hao himself could understand it. His hands clenched into fists. No one else could sense it, but along with Wang Tengfei's words had come an invisible attack that attempted to force Meng Hao to collapse. His body seemed as if it were about to disintegrate, his bones about to shatter. He felt a massive pressure trying to force him to kneel. His body shook, but he gritted his teeth and stood there, ignoring the pain in his bones. "That treasure is mine," said Wang Tengfei with a friendly smile. "It belongs to whomever I give it to. I didn't give it to you, so you have no right to take it." His words seemed friendly, but were filled with menace, clear for everyone to hear. Smiling, he walked forward, raising his hand and waving a finger in Meng Hao's direction. Winds surged in the square, screaming around in circles, causing the robes of the disciples to flap. Meng Hao stood still, as if the air in the square had become death itself and held him bound. He couldn't move a muscle. Suddenly, a pink jade pendant flew out from within his clothes and hovered in front of him. A pink shield appeared, covering Meng Hao protectively. Wang Tengfei looked as affable as ever. His movements seemed completely casual, and as he took a second step, his finger waved a second time. A bang resounded as the second finger movement stopped. The shield warped and twisted, flickering 3 times, then shattered in a deafening explosion. The jade pendant in front of him, the gift given to him by elder sister Su, broke into pieces. Blood poured out of Meng Hao's mouth, and the pressure on him increased. He gritted his teeth, unwavering. He stood there, trembling, unwilling to yield. An exceedingly dark look filled his eyes, and he clenched his fists harder. His fingernails dug deep into the flesh of his palms. With his usual kind smile, Wang Tengfei took a third step forward, landing directly in front of Meng Hao. He waved his finger a third time, and a force like a giant invisible hand ripped open Meng Hao's clothing, revealing the jadeite gourd bottle hanging around his neck. The invisible hand snatched the gourd bottle, wrenching it away from Meng Hao and depositing it in Wang Tengfei's palm. Meng Hao's face grew pale, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood. His body trembled, yet he couldn't move. Veins of blood appeared in his eyes, and his hands were clenched incredibly tight. He felt the pain of his fingernails digging deep into his flesh. Blood began to drip out from between his fingers and drop to the ground. "Cripple your cultivation base, sever an arm and a leg, Leave the sect. Wang Tengfei continued to smile, his warm voice reverberating across the square. He extended a finger for the fourth time, pointing toward Meng Hao's chest. Meng Hao glared back at Wang Tengfei. This entire time, he had only spoken once, never opening his mouth to say a second sentence. He did not scream or roar, but remained silent. More veins of blood appeared in his eyes, and he clenched his fists even tighter. Because of the power he exerted, his fingernails snapped, lodged in his flesh. Blood dripped like rain. Everything grew silent as people watched, their faces filled with derision. Their ridicule seemed to cut him away from the world, pushing him away until he was placed outside of everything. And yet he still would not submit, what was a bit of physical pain. Just as Wang Tengfei's finger was about to fall again, a sound rang out from a distant mountain peak, and a gentle power appeared next to Meng Hao, blocking the crippling finger. A bang rang out. Wang Tengfei flicked his wide sleeve and glanced to the side. An old man stood there, wearing a long grey robe. He had some mottled brown marks on his face, and though quite tall and big, didn't appear to be very mighty. This was the same person who had admired Meng Hao on the 2 previous occasions. "You've taken the treasure back," said the old man. "Let the matter drop." With a frown, he looked at Meng Hao standing there silently, blood dripping from his fists. He sighed, then looked back at Wang Tengfei. "Since it is Grand Elder Aoyang interceding, Junior will give in." Wang Tengfei smiled, looking indifferent. During the entire time, he had only spoken to Meng Hao twice. Sunlight shone down on him, illuminating his elegant figure, his long hair, his perfect demeanor. As far as he was concerned, Meng Hao didn't even match up to an insect. As of this moment, he'd already placed Meng Hao out of his mind. Meng Hao, covered in blood, was like a bug standing up against an elephant, who could crush him with a single step. To Wang Tengfei, the things that had just happened were nothing. It was not that he felt contempt toward Meng Hao. He just didn't care about him in the least bit. With a smile, he walked back into the crowd, chatting indifferently as if nothing had happened. He began to give pointers to lower-level disciples, emanating cordiality. All the female disciples seemed obsessed with him. The other cultivators viewed him with utmost respect. Everyone ignored Meng Hao as if they had already forgotten about his existence. Meng Hao was like the antithesis of Wang Tengfei. Covered in blood, his clothing in shreds, he cut a truly sorry figure. Meng Hao could sense what Wang Tengfei thought of him. It wasn't scorn, it was disregard. As Wang Tengfei left, Meng Hao felt a bit more relaxed, although his body hurt so bad it seemed he might collapse. Gritting his teeth, he saluted Grand Elder Aoyang with cupped hands. Without another word, Meng Hao coughed up another mouthful of blood, clenched his jaw, and slowly walked off. His feet felt as if they would disintegrate at any moment. He was soaked with sweat, and every step caused heartrending pain. Looking like a whipped dog, he slowly disappeared into the distance. As he walked off, Grand Elder Aoyang seemed to be about to say something, but decided not to, and simply watched him depart. Meng Hao returned to the Immortal's cave, and the instant the main door closed, he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Wang Tengfei was already at the peak of the 6th level. There was no way for Meng Hao to compare to him. By refusing to give in and kneel, he had of course received internal injuries. He was comatose for 2 full days, after which he finally opened his eyes, his body racked with pain. It was difficult to move, but he lurched up into a sitting position. When he touched the ground with his hands, they burned painfully, as if the skin had been stripped off of them. Gasping huskily, he sat there quietly in the middle of the Immortal's cave. After some time passed, he looked down at his hands. 10 broken fingernails protruded from the skin of his palms. After 2 days of coma, scabs had formed over the fingernails, But in his struggle to sit up, they had broken, and now blood oozed out. Meng Hao looked at his hands, expressionless. After a while, he began to dig the broken fingernails out of his skin, one by one. Blood flowed out of his mangled palms, dripping to the ground and filling the cave with the scent of gore. Through the entire process, Meng Hao's facial expression did not change. It was as if the hands didn't belong to him. There was a certain ruthlessness within him that was now clearly visible. He looked down at the 10 bloody fingernails. After a while, he collected them together and placed them next to the stone bed in the room. He planned to look at them every day as a reminder of the humiliation he had endured. The day would come when that humiliation would be repaid in double. He hadn't spoken for a long time, but now he opened his mouth. As for me, I shall rely on myself. The hoarse voice almost didn't sound like his own. Chapter 18. Faddy of the Outer Sect. Time flashed by. Meng Hao didn't even take half a step outside of the Immortal's cave. He didn't want to go out and didn't want to see anyone. He could never forget how Wang Tengfei had turned the whole world against him. He sat cross-legged, staring at the fingernails, encrusted with dried blood. His previous numbed expression changed into wrath, then somberness. Finally, one day, the main door of the Immortal's cave creaked open, and moonlight poured in. Elder sister Su stood there in the doorway, wreathed in moonlight which obscured her features. Meng Hao didn't say anything, and neither did she. Time passed. Finally, she said, "I ended my secluded meditation just yesterday." Meng Hao stood, saluting her with clasped hands. Wang Tengfei has an important background. She continued mildly. He's not from the state of Zhao, and his cultivation base is at the 6th level of qi condensation. The sect elders have already selected him to be promoted to the inner sect. You must not provoke him. Junior brother understands, said Meng Hao with a smile. His expression appeared to have returned to its usual state, as if he had abandoned any brooding about what had happened. Although deep in his eyes existed something which had never before appeared in his 16 years of life. It was a cold light he kept buried so deeply that only he could sense it. Others were clueless. However, said elder sister Su, if he causes any more trouble for you, all you have to do is smash this slip, and I will sense it, even if I'm meditating in seclusion. A moment passed, and then she waved her hand. A purple-colored jade slip appeared next to him. Of the 4 people I brought to the mountain that day, you are the first to be promoted to the outer sect. Your companion who you worked with in the North Servants' Quarter is being promoted today. Tomorrow at dawn, he will arrive in the outer sect to register. With that, she turned to leave. Many thanks, elder sister. I have a question I wish to ask, he said. I was hoping elder sister could explain. My cultivation base is at the 4th level of qi condensation. Considering my latent talent, how long do you think it will take to reach the 7th level? To reach the 4th level of qi condensation in less than a year seems to indicate that you have had quite a bit of good fortune in your cultivation. You don't need to explain the details, and I won't ask. Without such fortune, it might take 10 years at the fastest. At a slower rate, it could take half of a 60-year cycle. The 4th, 6th, and 8th levels are all bottlenecks, especially the 6th. Without a bit of good fortune, it's difficult to break through to the 7th level. It's like that for everyone. For everyone. Then she was gone. Meng Hao sat down cross-legged, a sharp look shining in his eye. An hour later, he stood up and left the Immortal's cave for the first time in days. The seasons were changing again, and it seemed autumn would arrive within a few days. The leaves were beginning to change color, and wind drifted across the mountains and valleys. Beneath the bright moon, Meng Hao made his way along a small path into the wild mountains. Everything was quiet, and the only thing that could be heard was the gentle rustle of falling leaves as Meng Hao made his way toward the North Mountain. He wanted to go see Fatty. In the entire sect, he was his only friend. The northern servants' quarter was quiet this late at night. As he approached, he heard the sounds of snoring filling the air, a special kind of snore that he had grown accustomed to in his 4 months as a servant. The horse-faced young man who presided over the northern servants' quarter sat cross-legged on the large boulder. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Meng Hao, surprised for a moment. Then he rose to his feet and saluted Meng Hao with clasped hands. "Greetings, elder brother Meng." Rumors about Meng Hao had abounded recently, and of course, the horse-faced young man had heard them. "No need for the formality, elder brother," said Meng Hao. "I'm here to see an old friend." Taking a look at the young man's cultivation base, Meng Hao could see that it was the third level of qi condensation. It appeared as if it had been stuck there for several years. Elder brother Horseface nodded. After Meng Hao stepped foot into the servants' quarter, he sat back down cross-legged, a strange expression on his face. With a silent sigh, he closed his eyes again. Meng Hao walked into the courtyard and found the East Seventh house. As he approached, the sounds of Fatty's snores filled the air. As soon as he entered, a strange expression filled his face, and the antsy feeling that had filled his heart recently began to dissipate. Fatty lay there on his back, snoring away. The other bed in the room had been pushed away from the wall, forming a small gap. There in the gap, sound asleep, was the big man who called himself Grandpa Tiger. Even though he was asleep, his face seemed contorted in fear, as if he had encountered something terrifying in his dreams. His wooden bed was covered with a multitude of bite marks. In some places, it was chewed all the way through, so much so that it seemed it might fall apart. The wooden table was long gone, and Meng Hao imagined that it must have been completely eaten up. Even the walls had bite marks on them. In sharp contrast, Fatty's bed remained biteless. The big man in the corner shivered, then let out a miserable cry. He was obviously in the throes of a nightmare. Given his emaciated appearance and the dark circles under his eyes, it seemed he hadn't been sleeping well lately. Meng Hao could only imagine the wretched circumstances that had tormented him into this state. It seemed his cry had awakened Fatty, who sat up looking annoyed, then saw Meng Hao. He suddenly grew excited. "Wild chicken. Did you bring any wild chicken?" Meng Hao looked at him, unable to hold back his smile. He was as round as ever, apparently having not lost even a bit of weight. In fact, he looked a bit fatter. His teeth had also grown longer by about half. When he talked, they glittered brightly. "I heard you reached the first level of qi condensation," he said with a smile. "So I came to see you. I was in such a hurry that I didn't have time to grab a chicken." He sat down on the bed next to Fatty, examining his teeth. Fatty, proud of his cultivation base, began to talk. Meng Hao didn't say much, instead listening to Fatty's garrulous chatter. Soon, the moon began to fall, and the sun began to rise. The wounds in Meng Hao's heart also began to dissipate, leaving behind only scars. The fingernails in the immortal's cave and the cold look in his eyes fused together within Meng Hao to create a more mature look. At dawn, Meng Hao left with Fatty. Grandpa Tiger watched them go, tears streaming down his face. His tears moved Fatty, and before they could leave the courtyard, he ran back, gave him a hug, and then said something. Whatever he said caused the big man's face to grow pale and his body to tremble. "What did you say to him?" asked Meng Hao, when they were just about to reach the outer sect. "He's a good person," After you left the servants' quarter, he became my friend. He was so upset at me leaving, I just couldn't take it." A pained expression appeared on his face. "I told him that I would definitely come back often to visit. He looks tough," continued Fatty emotionally. "But he's actually a bit of a coward. He always has nightmares when he sleeps. Poor guy." Meng Hao didn't say anything, nor did he ask anything else about the man. As the two of them walked through the outer sect, people looked at Meng Hao, their expressions strange, as if measuring him up. Seems you really rolled things up in the outer sect, Meng Hao," said Fatty excitedly. "Everyone's looking at you." In his mind, he figured that few people would be willing to bully him since he had Meng Hao at his back. Meng Hao smiled but didn't explain. When they were almost to the treasure pavilion, Meng Hao stopped walking. He watched Fatty approach the building. In the amount of time it took for half an incense stick to burn, Fatty returned excitedly. In his hand, he carried a short sword covered with a layer of fish-like scales. It wasn't the least bit sharp, but instead rough. "See the treasure I got, Meng Hao. It's truly a great treasure." He waved the sword in the air, and Meng Hao was just about to ask what it could possibly be used for when Fatty opened his mouth and started filing at his teeth with it. A scraping sound could be heard, and Meng Hao wasn't sure whether he should laugh or cry. "It's great," said Fatty, sounding more and more excited. "My teeth keep getting longer, and I'm constantly looking for things to file them down. But whatever I find always breaks within a few days. I can use this treasure to file them down forever." Meng Hao showed Fatty around the outer sect. He even offered to let him stay with him in the Immortal's cave, but Fatty refused. He had been living with a roommate for too long and had been looking forward to having his own place in the outer sect. No matter what Meng Hao said, he refused. When they arrived at his house, he looked completely content. Meng Hao didn't push him. When the night was deep, he returned to the Immortal's cave and sat down cross-legged. Time flew, and soon 3 months had passed. 2 months before, Meng Hao had reopened his stall by the low-level public zone. Perhaps because of what had happened with Wang Tengfei, no one caused any problems for him, and soon his business picked up again. Soon he added magic items to his offerings, and business grew even more. But now there was more than one person in the company. At his side was a fat teenager who constantly filed his teeth with a flying sword. He had a good sense for business and constantly hawked wares in the public zone. Soon he was the main force in the business. With the cooperation of Meng Hao, who could not enter himself, they made quite a tidy profit. One day, when winter had fallen and snowflakes filled the air, Meng Hao sat cross-legged at the edge of the plateau, meditating. Suddenly, Fatty let out a yelp and grabbed a person, dragging him toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao, look who it is." Chapter 19. The Wind Stirs Again. Meng Hao opened his eyes and saw Fatty excitedly dragging over a young man. Short, sallow, and emaciated, he made quite the contrast to pale, plump Fatty. Meng Hao recognized him. He was one of the members of the group who had been brought to the Reliance sect that day and taken along with Wang Yaokai to a servant's quarters on a different mountain. At that time, he had looked strong and good-natured, but now he seemed gloomy and in poor circumstances. However, there was a certain hardness in his eyes that spoke of some unforgettable experiences in the outer Reliance sect. Furthermore, he dared to enter the public zone at only the first level of qi condensation. "Greetings, elder brother Meng," said the young man, looking a bit excited. But then it disappeared, and he made an extremely respectful salute to Meng Hao with hands clasped. "Did you just enter the sect?" Meng Hao asked him, thinking back with a sigh to his own first days. It's been about a month, he said, lowering his head. What about Wang Yaokai? He died, said the young man, a numb expression on his face. After the words left his mouth, a look of grief appeared in his eyes. Wang Yaokai died, said Fatty in shock. Meng Hao maintained his silence. In the servants' quarter, we were responsible for drawing water, he explained. Big bro Yaokai thought I was too young, so he helped me a lot. Once on a mountain road, a powerful gust of wind hit us and knocked him off a cliff. I looked for his body for 2 months, but could only find some broken bones. He must have been eaten by wild animals. A look of sorrow appeared on Fatty's face, and Meng Hao let out a sigh. The four of them arrived at the same time, but in less than a year, one was already dead. Meng Hao felt bad, and even worse when he remembered that Uncle Wang, the carpenter, only had one son. Little tiger, you stick with us. With Meng Hao around, no one will dare bully you. Fatty clapped the young man, emotionally, on the shoulder. No, that's okay. I'm fine. The young man seemed to hesitate, and Meng Hao could tell that he was thinking about something. In the end, he shook his head and refused Fatty's offer. He saluted them with clasped hands, then made his way away from the plateau. What's the deal with him? Asked Fatty, still in shock. Everyone has secrets, said Meng Hao slowly. Perhaps he made some lucky break that he doesn't want to talk about. Otherwise, why would he come here at only the first level of qi condensation? Meng Hao seemed to be lost in thought as he watched the young man disappear into the distance. Even if Little Tiger has some secret, we could still find it out on our own if we wanted to. He's looking down on us. Fatty brooded. He had an open and straightforward personality and didn't think in scheming ways. To offer someone something in good faith and be turned down this way obviously raised his indignation. In the lower regions of the lands of South Heaven, winter was short and passed almost in an instant. The warmth of spring arrived, and the flowers bloomed. It was once again April. A year had passed since Meng Hao had arrived at the Reliance sect. With Fatty's help, he had accumulated quite a bit of spirit stones from the low-level public zone, and even more medicinal pills and magical items. He would often go into the wild mountains to hunt for demonic beasts. He even roamed close to the Black Mountain in his search, but always came up empty-handed. The roars which emanated from the Black Mountain region grew more and more intense, so Meng Hao didn't dare to enter. He had one third-level demonic core, which he duplicated multiple times with the copper mirror. Eventually, his cultivation base reached the middle of the fourth level, but then his progress virtually ceased. No matter how many medicinal pills he consumed, the only thing it did was make his spiritual energy a bit more pure. He had reached a bottleneck and could not break through to the fifth level and his much-desired wind-walking technique. With Meng Hao's help, Fatty reached the second level of qi condensation, which left him feeling quite awe-inspiring. That April, all outer sect disciples higher than the fifth level, as well as elder sister Su and elder brother Chen, were dispatched out of the sect. They each returned with 2 or 3 youths who possessed latent talent, who then became servants. Once per year, that was the sect rule. This was the only way to ensure the continuation of the sect's existence. The spring wind blew across the land, taking the cold along with it. Heat returned. Soon, autumn arrived, and then it was October. During this period of time, 2 important things happened in the Reliance sect. The first was related to one of the sect's grand elders. Other than the sect leader, who everyone said had already reached the core formation stage, there were 2 other grand elders who had reached foundation establishment. One of them, who had reached the end of his longevity, passed away while meditating, at around 150 years of age. When Meng Hao caught wind of this, he asked around and confirmed that it had not been Grand Elder Aoyang. When cultivators reach foundation establishment, it expands their longevity to 150 years. That seems like a long time, but it is actually a very intense period. If the cultivator cannot reach core formation, then in later years, they can only sit in meditation, shriveling up, their chi and blood slowly dissipating. However, after reaching core formation, longevity is then doubled to 300 years. Because of the Grand Elder's death in meditation, the Reliance sect was put in a bad position. It was already in a weak standing in the state of Zhao, and was now in even more danger. Suddenly, cultivators from other sects began to appear near the Reliance sect's borders. They seemed to be searching for something, so the Reliance sect set up defensive spells around the mountain. Everything within several thousand meters fell under their protection. Figurative storm clouds appeared, dark and thick, pressing down on the entire sect. Most disciples in the outer sect had their guesses. Some of them were more informed than others and received bits and pieces of information. News spread, and soon a rumor developed that the cultivation world of the state of Zhao was stirring because of Patriarch Reliance, who had been missing for 400 years. As for the details, none of the outer sect disciples were sure. During this time, Meng Hao's cultivation base continued to be stuck in the middle of the fourth level. Nothing he did seemed to have any effect, and finally he grew to accept that he was stuck in a bottleneck. He sat cross-legged in the Immortal's cave, frowning. Elder Sister Su told me that breaking through from the peak of the fourth level into the fifth level would involve a bottleneck. But why did my bottleneck come early? Is it really because I consumed too many demonic cores? If that's the case, I need some medicinal pills especially designed for breaking through bottlenecks. Or perhaps I need some high-level demonic cores. He had quite a collection of spirit stones, but lacked the appropriate medicinal pills. He was confident that if he just had the right medicinal pills, he could break through to the fifth level of chi condensation. The anxiety in the Reliance sect was palpable. Many disciples walked to and fro with troubled hearts, trying their best to hide their feelings. Meng Hao felt the nervousness too, and of course he was dealing with his own critical matter. The only person who seemed happy was Fatty. He was even more enthusiastic about their stall on the plateau than Meng Hao. Even when Meng Hao didn't feel like going, he would take the banner there himself to do business. 3 days later, bells sounded out. Pill distribution day had come. When Meng Hao and Fatty arrived at the square, Meng Hao caught sight of a golden-robed old man on the platform, behind whom stood elder sister Su and elder brother Chen. Seeing this, Meng Hao's heart began to thump, and a fire burned in his eyes. In the past year and a half, Master Uncle Shangyuan has only appeared 3 times, and each time was an individual pill distribution. My cultivation base has been stuck in a bottleneck in the 4th level for almost a year. If there is a high-level medicinal pill. Other outer sect disciples had similar thoughts, and soon conversations buzzed in the air. Of course, some disciples were thinking, "Please don't give it to me." This was especially so, because after what Meng Hao did with his pill that time, the sect had made a new rule that prohibited gifting individual distribution medicinal pills to members of the inner sect. It's a dry spirit pill. It is a dry spirit pill. There was one distributed last year, and now one more, only one per year. That just shows how valuable it is. If I can get my hands on it, I will definitely have a breakthrough in my cultivation base. A louder buzz of excited talk arose as the gold-robed old man lifted the glowing, purple pill into the air. When the pill appeared, Meng Hao's eyes shone with a brilliant intensity. He had never before wanted a medicinal pill so much. In his eyes, It was not a medicinal pill, but his only hope of breaking through to the fifth level of qi condensation. He had been a member of the sect for a while now, so he was now familiar with the various disciples. The inner sect had elder sister Su and elder brother Chen, both of whom were at the seventh level of qi condensation. Rumor had it they would break through to the next level very soon. Under them was Wang Tengfei, who was stuck at the peak of the sixth level of qi condensation. To him, a dry spirit pill would be of little use. Besides him, there was one more disciple of the sixth level, the number 2 disciple Han Zhang. Meng Hao had seen him twice, and had pegged him to be wildly arrogant, someone who considered everyone to be beneath his notice. If he were here, he wouldn't even cast a glance at the dry spirit pill, just to show that he had a collection of even better medicinal pills. As for disciples of the fifth level of qi condensation, there were 4 in the outer sect, and they could be considered to be virtual lords. They were rarely seen, as they often secluded themselves in meditation or traveled about the wild mountains in training. There weren't many disciples of the fourth level. Including Meng Hao, there were 7 in total. As for those under the fourth level, they might as well be bugs. Very well, quiet down everyone. Wizened Shangyuan Zhu's voice reverberated out, as astonishingly powerful and suppressive as ever. However, compared to last year, Meng Hao was not as powerfully affected. Instead, his eyes shone with determination. In the past 2 years in which I have presided over pill distribution, I usually prefer to select a new disciple. The reason is that if we can continue to get new disciples, our sect will flourish. He smiled, and his eyes swept over the crowd. Just when it seemed he had made his decision, his eyes fell upon Fatty, who stood next to Meng Hao filing away at his teeth with a sword. His face looked indifferent. He looked as round as a ball, and anyone who for the first time caught sight of him filing his teeth would find it hard pressed to decide whether to laugh or cry. Shangyuan Zhu stared in amazement, then laughed. "Never mind," he said. "I'm going to give the pill to you." He waved his right hand, and a purple light flickered as the dry spirit pill shot toward Fatty. With a look of shock, he instinctively caught it, looking as if he didn't even know what had just happened. Then his expression changed, and he let out a yelp. His body began to tremble as the blood drained from his face. He looked like he was about to cry. Me, crap, why did it have to be me? Chapter 20. Entering the Black Mountain. In a split second, everyone in the entire square suddenly began to stare at Fatty, making him feel as if a cold wind were creeping down his back. His body quivered, and he looked pitifully at Meng Hao, a weak smile on his face. Meng Hao, save me. He wanted to throw the pill away, but for some reason it wouldn't leave his hand. He was so frightened that as people began to surround them, his teeth chattered. As the lights faded, he trembled violently. Then the lights were gone, and the restrictive spell released. Before Fatty could say anything, Meng Hao sent out a booming flash of his fourth-level cultivation base, then grabbed Fatty by his robe and charged away. "Give me the pill," Meng Hao said, in a low voice. "You go back to the Immortal's cave and hide." Without hesitation, Meng Hao tossed him the cave's jade slip. Fatty threw him the dry spirit pill as if it were a hot potato. Meng Hao's body flashed as he sped forward with Fatty in tow. Behind him, howling and roaring sounds arose as 10 or more people raced in hot pursuit. "Damn it, it's Meng Hao. You can't escape. Hand over the dry spirit pill. As a fellow disciple, I'll show some mercy and not kill you. Otherwise, you'll have a tough time escaping death." Meng Hao didn't stop for even a second. After emerging from the edge of the outer sect, he tossed Fatty away from him. Fatty was a matter-of-fact kind of person, but he wasn't stupid. As soon as he landed on his feet, he let out a miserable shriek. "Pale thief!" He screamed, clutching the jade slip close to him as he ran off, trying not to look suspicious. He dashed toward the Immortal's cave at top speed. Hearing this, the pursuers ignored him and continued after Meng Hao. Flee to the ends of the earth if you want. You won't survive the next 24 hours. You're of the 4th level, and you still don't give me the pill. Among the 10 or more pursuers, most were of the 4th level of qi condensation, and only 2 were of the 5th level. The rest were of the 3rd level, obviously hoping to be able to take advantage of the situation. Cold sword auras whistled behind Meng Hao as over 10 flying swords descended toward him like rain. But he was determined to keep the dry spirit pill and refused to toss it away. I just have to endure for 24 hours, then the pill will be mine, he said, determination shining in his eyes. Then I will finally be able to break through to the 5th level of qi condensation. He increased his speed. After spending so much time hunting for demonic beasts in the wild mountains, his top speed was not inferior, and he was much more familiar with the mountainous regions than most other fellow disciples. Thus, upon leaving the outer sect, he raced towards mountains. Glancing behind at the approaching sword auras, Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding to produce a medicinal pill which he immediately swallowed. Then he sent his own flying swords shooting backwards. Bang, bang, bang. Several trees were hit by the powerful flying swords and exploded into pieces, which flew about everywhere. Some smacked painfully into Meng Hao. Absorbing momentum from the explosion, he shot away several meters. Before he could land on the ground, 4 flame serpents and 3 water globes shot toward him. 2 of the flame serpents were almost 18 meters long and as thick as a person, and emitted an intense heat which caused some of the nearby trees to catch fire. Those would be the work of the 5th level disciples, who were also the fastest of the bunch. Their feet didn't even touch the ground as they flew toward him like the wind. Savage looks filled their faces. Actually, they didn't hold the slightest bit of compassion even for each other. As far as they were concerned, the only competition involved were the 2 of them. Meng Hao didn't count for anything. Without hesitation, Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding again. 2 flying swords appeared and rotated around him, then came to rest beneath his feet. Then they shot forward, carrying him nearly 30 meters before he lost his balance and fell off. The short movement enabled him to evade the flame serpents and gain some distance. Furious howls reverberated in the air behind him. This was a technique Meng Hao had come up with himself. It wouldn't work for long, only a few seconds, but at least it helped him to gain a bit of advantage on the 2 5th-level cultivators. If I were of the 5th level of qi condensation, Meng Hao thought to himself, I would have the wind-walking technique. Then I could stay on the flying sword for a lot longer, and I could get away more easily. Sadly, this isn't really flying. Even more than ever, he desired to reach the 5th level of qi condensation. Not looking back, he sped along. Actually, the path he chose was not random. The instant the dry spirit pill had landed in Fatty's hands, his mind had been racing at top speed. He had picked the wild mountains because his destination was none other than the Black Mountain inhabited by demonic beasts. After thinking about it for some time, he had decided that his best advantage was the copper mirror. With the mirror, he would still have a good chance of surviving the area even though it was dangerous and contained that ominous roaring beast. This was especially true if people followed him in. If these guys chase me into the Black Mountain, then I'll be forced to kill them. A harsh expression appeared on his face. He had been a part of the Reliance sect for over a year now and was no longer the weak scholar he had once been. He didn't appear to have changed much on the outside. He was a bit taller, and his skin was as swarthy as ever, but his heart was filled with decisiveness. This was especially so after the matter with Wang Tengfei. He knew that he could only rely on himself. The only true path was to become stronger. In the world of cultivation, the law of the jungle prevails. One must conduct oneself with caution and decisiveness. They pursued him relentlessly. Sword auras glittered. Before long, the two fifth-level cultivators had almost caught up with him, their eyes filled with murder. Just now, Meng Hao had evaded their attack using a single special move. Other than Wang Tengfei and Han Zhang, they were like high lords in the outer sect, so they found this particularly humiliating. They had attacked at the same time, and yet Meng Hao had still managed to evade, which they both found hard to accept. Now, they wanted even more than ever to slay him. As far as his sword-riding technique, they didn't give it a second thought. Any cultivator of the fourth level could do that, but considering their cultivation base, doing so would be a waste of spiritual energy, even if it gave some extra speed. Seeing Meng Hao use the technique, they sneered. Using such tactics would sap his spiritual energy sooner rather than later. Let's see you escape this time. They shouted, glancing at each other. One of them suddenly shot forward like a huge bird. In midair, he waved his hand, and two massive, roaring flame serpents shot down toward Meng Hao. The other man continued to pursue Meng Hao. The two of them created a pincer attack, one in the air and one on the ground, ready to seal Meng Hao's fate in death. You still won't accept death, grinned one of them hideously, his murderous intent filling the air. Meng Hao's expression didn't change. He gave a cold snort. He dared to snatch the dry spirit pill, so of course he had some special techniques prepared. He slapped his bag of hold and flicked his sleeve. 6 flying swords appeared. Their sword auras interlocked and then whizzed outward, away from Meng Hao. Boom! Meng Hao let out a small shout of pain which reverberated into the mountains. When the two pursuing cultivators heard the explosion, they gasped with astonishment, unsure of what had happened to produce such a sound. Amidst the thunderous roar, Meng Hao spat out a mouthful of blood, and yet his body shot away into the distance. Behind him, the effects of the attack dissipated, and the flame serpents collapsed with blood-curdling shrieks. The fifth-level cultivators had no choice but to retreat a few paces, covered in dirt, their faces filled with disbelief. Damn it, what ruthlessness! He detonated 6 flying swords at once. No wonder he opened up a shop. How many flying swords does he actually have? The two of them each sucked in a breath, but didn't hesitate. Using the full speed of their wind-walking technique, they raced in pursuit again, unwilling to let Meng Hao intimidate them. According to their estimations, Meng Hao could not have that many flying swords left. Even if he had opened a shop in the low-level public zone, he couldn't possibly have so many magical items. This time, you will die for sure. The two pursuers increased their speed, entering the wild mountains. At this point, the pursuing fourth-level disciples caught up. One of them was Wang Tengfei's friend, Xianxia Song. His cultivation base was at the peak of the fourth level of qi condensation. His face was grim. He secretly feared Meng Hao's speed, and yet he continued to pursue. Time gradually passed by, and soon an hour had passed. Meng Hao continued forward, maintaining the distance from his pursuers. A few times he came into danger, but each time he produced a flying sword, detonated it, and escaped. This left the pursuing fifth-level cultivators dumbstruck. They moaned to themselves, never having imagined that Meng Hao would have so many flying swords. At this point, he had detonated nearly 12 of them. Combined with his sword-riding technique, his speed of evasion was quite high. Damn it! Even if he has more flying swords, I can't believe that he'll produce many more. In any case, at the speed he's been maintaining, plus detonating all those flying sword, he has used a huge amount of spiritual energy. Correct. His cultivation base is at the fourth level of chi condensation, not nearly as deep as mine. Using spiritual energy to ride flying swords wastes so much, it can kill you. The two pursuing fifth-level cultivators were now getting pumped up. And yet just as they finished talking, they caught sight of Meng Hao up ahead, and they saw something that left them feeling anything but reassured. Even as he ran, Meng Hao pulled out a second bag of holding, from which he produced a handful of medicinal pills which he swallowed. This he did with casual ease, leaving the onlookers with the feeling that he had countless medicinal pills at his disposal. Actually, that was true. In the following 4 hours, the two pursuers discovered that he had an enormous amount of flying swords and medicinal pills. They were already deeply shaken. Opening a store is this profitable? They thought. They were cultivators of the fifth level of chi condensation and could not possibly be without medicinal pills. Furthermore, after having spent so much effort in their pursuit, they couldn't bear to give up. Reluctantly, they produced some pills and consumed them, then continued their pursuit, their hearts filled with the desire to slay Meng Hao. By the time the 6th hour had arrived, the dark, black mountain had appeared in front of Meng Hao. Lying concealed among the other wild mountains, it gave off a ghastly, cold air. It seemed as if it were filled with sinister gloom. When he caught sight of the mountain, his eyes gleamed. He had expended a lot of energy along the way and felt a bit of painful regret. To him, every flying sword and every medicinal pill cost spirit stones. But he couldn't worry too much about that right now. Without hesitation, he shot into the Black Mountain. The two pursuing cultivators followed him in. Some more time passed, and more pursuers appeared, one by one. Upon seeing the Black Mountain, they gaped in astonishment, then entered.